Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for our third annual Market Forecast Luncheon. Appreciate having everyone here. My name's Darren Pughes. I'm the sales manager for TOK's East Idaho markets and our Idaho Falls office. And we've got three new faces on our panel since our last Market Forecast event that I want to introduce you guys to everybody in case you haven't had a chance to get to know them already. Brent Wilson and Brian Wilson next to him opened up the TOK East Idaho office in 2016. Next to them is Blake Phippen. He's one of our new guys that joined about a year ago. Blake was a football player at Utah State, and we hired him because of his blocking and tackling capabilities. Mark Bouchard happens to be Blake's father-in-law, and Mark has a long career in real estate development and brokerage. Most everybody in East Idaho knows Dennis Stevens. Dennis joined our firm last year, and we're super excited to have him on board. He's been a broker in East Idaho for 45 years. So yeah, he's still teaching us new things we didn't know. And Nick Terry's at the end. Nick just finished up his third anniversary with TOK, and his background before brokerage was in commercial lending. So that's our panel, and in case you don't have a chance to get to know everybody. A little bit about TOK. We have now opened an office in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So we have offices in all of Idaho's major metro markets. We're the market share leader in the state of Idaho in brokerage and property management. In the East Idaho office, we've had a lot of growth internally. We've doubled our staff in 2023, and we now have 12 people in our office, the 7 brokers on the stage, and 2 property managers, and a member of our research team, and a member of our transaction coordinators and our marketing team. So we're growing. We're trying to be as aggressive as we can about our growth to keep up with the growing market in East Idaho and in Idaho as a state. Our property management sector of our business is one of the fastest growing sectors of our business. We now manage over 500,000 square feet in East Idaho, and that's the largest commercial property management portfolio in the MSA. So that keeps growing every day. Across the state, we manage 14 million square feet, and that also makes TOK the largest property management portfolio statewide. Our brokerage teams across the state closed 800 transactions last year, and so we're really lucky to be working in the state of Idaho. All eyes are on Idaho right now, and so it's a really good place to be if you're in the brokerage business and the property management business. This year, TOK was recognized on Idaho Best Places to Work list for the 16th year in a row, and that makes us the only Idaho company to have made that list, 16 consecutive years in a row. So I feel like we're doing some good things there, both in the market and also with our employees and balance that way. When I grew up in East Idaho, it's going to show my age a little bit here, but the speed limit on Interstate 15 was 55 miles an hour. And I grew up in Idaho Falls, and as a little kid, I remember making trips with my family to Pocatello or to Rexburg, and it was a journey from one community to the next. With those markets were separated by a lot of farmland, slower moving, longer drive. We have reached a point with all of this growth where all of those markets from Rexburg to Pocatello have started to interconnect. And I know you guys know when you drive out of Idaho Falls to the north, there's not a lot of places out there where you have a vast expanse of agricultural land on Highway 20 between Idaho Falls and Rigby, and then again from Rigby to Rexburg. So along with the connectivity within the market, we've developed a large population of people in the rural communities outside the city limits of the main submarkets. And communities like Ammon and Chubbuck, Idaho, have added a tremendous amount of population to our East Idaho market. And so we're really changing this last couple of years over from the optics are different. When companies are looking at East Idaho in past years, they would say, well, we have Pocatello down the road at 50,000 people. I think they're 55,000 people now with some of the growth. And the city of Idaho Falls is now up to 66,000 people. And Rexburg is at 44,000 people now. And those are all inside city limit population statistics. But when we look at it from a more broad view, the East Idaho metropolitan statistical area now has almost 400,000 people in it, from Pocatello to Rexburg. And the perspective that companies are taking is now more about a singular marketplace where we have 400,000 people, as opposed to the largest city being Idaho Falls with 66,000. And so when these companies are looking at markets, they have, population metrics that they require before they'll enter the market. And as people are starting to look at this through a different lens, East Idaho is now like a marketplace. It's about half the size of the Treasure Valley, the Boise market. And so as a result, we've got a tremendous amount of inbound business. We have, for the first time ever, we've got a lot of interest from national and regional investors and developers that want to plant a flag here, that want to invest in our community. And so it's an exciting time. And we believe that we're going to continue to see strong growth in the market. The Milken Report, most of you guys are familiar with, a really well-respected publication, just named Idaho Falls for the second year in a row the top performing small market in the country. And it's also the third time in the last 5 years that Idaho Falls has been on the top of that. And if you read the report in detail, the state of Idaho had 4 tertiary, markets on the list, and it included Coeur d'Alene and Twin Falls, and then also Pocatello came in at number 7 on the list. So just right here in East Idaho, we had a number 1 tertiary market and a number 7 tertiary market, and it's driving all kinds of attention into East Idaho. That study is put together on the merits of technology impact, labor market performance, and economic stability, along with some other factors that are big right now, like resilience to pandemics and recessions and stuff. And so while we are hitting the top of those metrics in all of those categories, we also are at a place where our real estate values are underneath of most of the surrounding markets. Okay, so if you take a close look at Missoula, Montana, or Bozeman, Montana, Logan, Utah, Ogden, certainly Boise and Salt Lake City, we're the best priced game in town, if you will, for companies to land in terms of occupancy cost and commercial real estate, and in most cases also the cost of energy. East Idaho, if you're a small market broker, East Idaho is where you want to be, because we're at the top of all that list. I think the same argument can be made for investors and developers and businesses of all sorts. With that, I'm going to turn the mic over to TOK's Managing Director, my good pal, Michael Ballantyne, and we'll get started with our panel discussion. Thanks again for coming.
Thanks, Darren. I just want to offer my welcome, or thank you for being here as well. I guess in 2016, when I sat down with Brent and Brian and said, hey, I think we want to come to this market and do some property management, Brent said, oh no, we're going to do brokerage too, and we're going to join your team. It turned out great. And I'd tell everybody, hey, I'm going over to Eastern Idaho. And they're, why are you going to Eastern Idaho? And I just tell them it was a boondoggle so I could go fishing. But now when I say, hey, I got to be out of town, I'm going to be in Eastern Idaho, they're like, man, that market is on fire. That is crazy over there. And it really is. We try to be in all the markets that are on fire. You'll never see TOK in LA or Chicago. We want to be in what I call lifestyle markets, places like Idaho Falls and Coeur d'Alene and Boise and the Magic Valley and where people are moving for quality of life, and so we've been really lucky. TOK, as Darren talked about, we have about 140 people, of which 30 are partners. It's a different model. We believe in ownership. So more than 20% of our team are partners in the firm. And we think that gives our clients the best possible service. So what we're going to do today, we're going to have a panel discussion. I'm going to ask some questions of the guys here on the stage. And as we answer those questions, if a question comes up in your mind, just raise your hand and we'll answer that question as well. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start with the office market. We should have, as we're talking, you'll see slides pop up on the screen that share some market information. We're going to kick off with office. Net absorption hit negative levels in Eastern Idaho at the end of Q1, mainly due to two large move-outs. Wells Fargo vacated 22,000 square feet in downtown Idaho Falls, and Battelle vacated almost 17,000 feet on Constitution. However, demand for office remains healthy, with the number of transactions up almost 60% since Q1 of 2023. Additionally, office vacancy in Eastern Idaho ended Q1 at only 5.6. This is lower than larger markets like the Boise MSA. So let's start with Nick. Eastern Idaho office market has stayed resilient compared to larger markets. Why do you think office vacancy is so low in Eastern Idaho compared to the national office market?
Well, I think kind of one of the things that you mentioned of why you want to be in areas that are growing and on fire, livestock type communities. Idaho Falls is, in our estimation and what we're experiencing, an area where a lot of people are moving to. I know as we read through a lot of the media news about commercial real estate and office space and everything's imploding and it's going to fall apart. That's probably true in areas like LA and Detroit, where they've got very large office buildings with several hundred thousand square feet rented out to one or two or maybe three tenants. We don't have spaces like that here in Eastern Idaho. Most of the spaces here are smaller, right? The two buildings that became vacant that you just mentioned, the Wells Fargo building and the Battelle building, well, that impacted our vacancy rate, because they're larger buildings. And for the most part, a lot of the smaller buildings are where a lot of the demand is in a smaller community like Idaho Falls.
So if you read the Wall Street Journal, office is dead, right?
Yeah.
But what trends are we seeing here post-COVID with office?
Yeah, so there's definitely some movement in people wanting to work from home. I think a lot of the employees want to work from home as much as possible, but I'm talking to a lot of people in the community that are saying, I'm not as productive at home. And it's not across the board, right? There are some people that have the right type of task-oriented employment where they can work from home and be completely productive. But if you have to collaborate with your teammates or your other coworkers and you have to coordinate with them, it becomes much more difficult, is the feedback that we're getting. So even though the technology is there to work from home, not all employers are finding the benefit that they did shortly after COVID.
Right. Like, what's a typical office user look like in Idaho Falls or Pocatello?
Yeah, most of the office activity right now, that sweet spot that we're getting a lot of calls on, a lot of activity is in that 1,000 square foot, 1,200 square foot, up to 2,000, maybe 2,500 square foot size. I get calls on those sizes, if not every day, every other day, people looking for them. And like you said, vacancy is still relatively low. And so the spaces out there are still kind of challenging to find for these tenants. As for the types of tenants, lots of them are local. They're growing into their second space, looking to upsize a little bit, expand their business, their operations, or as Darren kind of said, regionally, getting more interest from regional national tenants. They're looking to have a satellite office here or something like that. And so really that 1,200 to 2,400 square foot range, which is also kind of the size that the buildings are being put up right now. We're getting quite a few of those smaller buildings that can either that size or subdivide down to, 2 or 3 1,200 square foot suites that you can take 1 or 2 or 3.
So until Q1, Boise had positive net absorption, and all the offices we served had positive net absorption, but even Salt Lake had negative net absorption. Is Boise Twin Falls, Idaho Falls, Pocatello, are they just behind the curve, or is there something different going on here that you're seeing in a lot of other markets? I'll throw that out to anybody.
I I just wanted to say that a lot of the issues are infrastructure that we're running into here. I believe in Idaho Falls, in this area, the demand is so much greater than what's available. You know, we get calls all the time. It's like, we need 5,000 square feet, we need 10,000 square feet, we need 200,000 square feet. You know, and you're like, okay, we can build it for you. You know, and they're like, oh, you don't have something, you don't have 10 buildings that we can choose from. You know, it's just like, no, we don't have anything.
So we don't have a lot of large floor plate office users in this market like the big cities do. I remember I was a broker in Denver after the dot-com crash of 2001, and you would see tenants just wipe out 300,000 square feet in one fell swoop. And, most of our office buildings here are sub 12,000 feet. I mean, they all look the same. You can drive down Medical Mile on Sunnyside and they all look the same. So we're smaller. We don't have the boom and bust cycles that the big cities have. If you read the Wall Street Journal, like Michael said, you're expecting doom and gloom, like it's 2009 all over again. But we don't have a lot of big institutional landlords here in town with big institutional portfolios, and we're going to be just fine.
Interesting. I definitely think there's a socioeconomic piece. You got political refugees coming to this market, that type of thing. But I agree on the boom and bust. And, it was interesting. I was reading the Wall Street Journal, and there's this article about this amazing $158 million office building in downtown St. Louis that sold for $2 million, right? 2 days later, there's an article about how dangerous downtown St. Louis is, right? There's a cause and effect there, right? I've been in downtown San Francisco. You do not want to go to work in downtown San Francisco. It is a mess.
Anyone into the INL in the audience? It's not a trick question. Just the reason I ask is, obviously the office market is entirely dependent on the INL. And I know some things with the New Scale project fading away. And so I would pose it to anyone with the INL. Just where do you see the office market going? Because as Nick and Blake alluded to, the sub 5,000 square foot users, I mean, those are going as soon as they hit the market. But the smaller users, the Constitution, the Wells Fargo building, we also have 1875 International. It's 28,000 square feet still available. So those larger office users, tough to find tenants for those.
Well, I would say one other thing that we're seeing as a nationwide trend, we work a lot with READY and other economic development organizations. And, the big thing is data centers. And the biggest thing with data centers is power, right? Microsoft just announced that they had to purchase a site next to a nuclear power plant for a data center. It's that important. And that plays into the INL discussion because the small batch reactor, while it hasn't taken off yet, I really do believe that will take off. And Idaho Power is cheap power and generally temperate climate. Better to be cold than too hot. With the data center, you're going to see continued growth, I think, on the technology side.
Make a correction. 1875 is not an office building. It's a ready to go data center. Anyone's looking.
Yeah, there you go. It's now a data center
everybody's
since I
listening.
made that
Let's make
comment. Speaking of data centers, let's segue into industrial. Industrial activity in Eastern Idaho has remained resilient. Vacancy has seen an uptick due to more supply coming online as construction and development continue to boom in Eastern Idaho. An impressive amount of new industrial product hit Eastern Idaho market last year with nearly 725,000 square feet of new construction delivered. This is up almost 60% from 2022. Of this new construction, speculative projects made up 57%. So let's start with you, Darren. Do you feel this new spec space in the market will get leased up quickly? And how is the balance between supply and demand?
Yeah.
So we got brokers
this-
pushing buttons when they're not
Got
supposed to
it.
push
Yeah.
buttons.
So
Brokers do not follow directions. I'm the chief example of that.
We have about 12 million square feet of industrial product in East Idaho. And each of the last 3 years, we've had gross absorption numbers at about 775,000 square feet, which So far through the end of April, we had already absorbed about 250,000. So it puts us on track to, we're on the same paces that we have been for the last 3 years in a row. We have 140,000 square feet currently under construction in the market. So this is really easy math to do. We need a home for 775,000 square feet. We've already filled 250,000 of it, and there's another 140,000 in the pipeline under construction, which leaves us with another giant shortfall. So this will be another year like the preceding, 4 or 5 years now, where our vacancy rates stay really low in the marketplace. Our demand is wildly outpacing our supply. And I guess to answer your question about will the product lease up, and anything that's built that's not super unique, super specialized product to one particular type of user. If it's a broad reaching product that people can use, it leases up almost instantly. And the most recent example I can think of is that Blake took out a 12,000 square foot industrial building a couple of months ago, and I think he leased it in 3 weeks. And 3 weeks later, we had it under contract to with a buyer to sell it as an investment for him. So that product type is really, really hot right now.
Okay, well, let's talk rents, because you can't build new product and lease it for 78 cents and make any money, right? So I assume that 78 cents is all product across the board, including older product. So with lease rates, how do they compare to other markets, and can developers actually build and make it pencil? I'll leave that to anybody here. Don't push the button. He pushed the button.
Yeah, well, literally since 2019, we've had an upswinging, graph on market lease rates. We know we've seen a giant increase in construction costs, especially coming through 2019 and 2020. That started to smooth out some, but you mentioned 78 cents a square foot is what's on the screen. I think the last deals we were doing were at 90 cents and $1 a square foot. And for any kind of significant office build out on the inside of these warehouses, we're driving those numbers up even higher. So, and really, when a tenant comes into the market, they just don't have a whole lot of stuff to choose from. And so the developers that I work closely with and I'm tracking the numbers with are able to put the product out on the market and lease it out at a number that makes good sense. So
In some of the other markets, we're seeing a lot of distribution, last mile, especially for Amazon, people like that. Are you seeing that in this market as well?
Okay.
He's just trying to keep up with you.
I see it. What we're seeing is the same thing that Darren said earlier, as far as these larger groups see the appeal in East Idaho. Just how business friendly Idaho is, especially compared to if they need to set up just distribution channels to Montana and Wyoming. Wyoming doesn't seem to have the product. And Montana's real estate values are just insane. So they set up shop, Idaho Falls, and create distribution centers from there. I mean, we're getting calls from a number of larger groups coming into the market looking to do that.
What other projects are coming online, and are there any redevelopment projects that are out there as well? Brian, I think you're working on one as well, right?
We've got a few in the pipeline. Exit 113, we do have 25,000 square feet on Bombardier right off of Yellowstone. That's going to be delivered to Shell Q4 of this year. We also do have the Gateway Business Park development. That's going to be on Doug Andrus with I-15 highway exposure. That's something that Brent and I have heard from users for years, especially from the Salt Lake corridor, saying, yeah, we need warehousing, we need industrial space, but we like the advertising along I-15, but we just haven't had the product there. So as that rolls out, I think we're going to see a lot of those users come up from Salt Lake and other areas.
Well, Pocatello, are you seeing a difference in demand for industrial between Pocatello and Idaho Falls?
So we have the Titan Center. If you're not familiar with that, it's an old World War II gunnery facility. They would literally manufacture the Navy guns, put them on a train, and ship them to San Diego during World War II. It's a beautiful, huge project, over 1.5 million square feet available. But I mean, it is on fire right now. We have 120,000 square foot lease that's out for signature. We have another project, which would be really good for the community, about 43,000, should I say? That, by the way, that's Paul Baker, who's the vice president for the Portneuf Valley Soccer Club. We just got a rezone on that, so we're working through some final details, but they're also going to be on the project. Tomorrow, I'm meeting with a group that wants 84,000 square feet. And there's a couple things that is on fire. One is which is because it's only one of a handful of facilities in the country that can help out and have those groups as tenants. The other is our policymakers. We shouldn't take for granted how great this state is and how much they drive business. A lot of the groups that we're meeting with, and I say, so what's driving your growth? And they'll say, oh, it's, believe it or not, the Micron deal, or it's Meta, and we're getting bids, and we're going over there, and we're working on this. So it's a great time. It's a great opportunity. And also at Titan too, we're seeing a lot of groups that want to be in Salt Lake, but the lease rates are just astronomical. So they're actually just coming further north.
So maybe Mark, you can answer this one. In Boise, Magic Valley, and up in the Spokane and Coeur d'Alene markets, we're seeing a lot of industrial construction. Most of it, the typical size will demise down to 20,000 feet. Are you seeing product that big here, or what type of product are you seeing in this market?
Yeah, there's been very little product developed at that size in terms of minimum divisible at 20,000 feet. I think the sweet spot in Southeast Idaho has been in the 4,000 to 8,000 square foot range divisible. It wasn't that long ago, if you look at the Anderson Business Park, where multi-tenant product was being divided down as little as 2,000 feet. So, you know, we've upgraded from that. Most of the product that's coming online now, you know, was mentioned the project that Blake recently did. We did one 4,000, one 8,000 square foot user before we actually had the C of O on the building. That tends to be where the demand is. I think the reason behind that demand, though, continues to be local expansion. We're seeing a lot of companies that are locally expanding from where they were. You know, we have this strong in-migration number. We're on everybody's radar in terms of a good place to live, generally in Southeast Idaho. And that expansion of the overall economy is also expanding the growth of these smaller indigenous companies that are in the service business. And we're seeing a lot of that expansion. That's industrial flex product is a perfect environment for them. I think when we start to look at bigger product, one of the things we haven't touched upon that is really attraction for companies that are looking here is the inexpensive power costs that we have. Idaho compared to Utah, Colorado, and some of the surrounding states, our power is significantly less expensive overall than they can find in those places. And power ends up being, you know, for some manufacturers and some distributors, a big issue when you're looking at industrial product. So I expect on the horizon, especially as we start to evolve our economic development efforts as a community, that we're going to see more and more interest in that regard. Southeast Idaho makes a lot of sense as a corridor for that type of user because of its access to Wyoming and Montana. Also, its access to Utah. I think that 4,000 to 8,000 square foot user, if we talk about it next year, maybe a 6,000 to 10,000 square foot user will be the greater demand at that point in time.
I agree. Okay, let's shift gears and talk about retail a little bit. In Eastern Idaho, we did see net absorption hit negative level at the end of Q1. However, this is due to large big box vacancy. Planet Doom vacated 30,000 square feet. That sounds ominous. Overall, though, retail demand has remained healthy across all Southern Idaho markets, considering vacancy is below the national average. Vacancy in Eastern Idaho ended Q1 at 4.4%, and we have seen overall vacancies consistently stay below 5.5% for over 2 years. So let's talk about vacancy rates. Obviously, 5.5% is basically fully occupied almost. Brent or Brian, do you anticipate vacancy staying low, and what type of retailers are driving demand in this market?
Yeah, I do anticipate vacancies are going to stay low. There's a ton of pent up demand that we just can't build for right now because of construction costs. I remember when Christian from Ball Ventures and I started working on Sand Creek Commons, it was about $110 a square foot to deliver core and shell space. And we're more than double that today. So there's a bunch of retailers that are hovering around the market that would love for us to build space for them, but they can't afford the rent given the construction costs. I mean, it's a small market. What the retailers can afford to pay in rent is a proportion of their gross sales. And we've hit that ceiling and we've exceeded it. So if we had more space delivered and it made financial sense, we would fill that up in a heartbeat. If you look at Rexburg, for example, that former Kmart that's been vacant for quite a long time is leased up, and we've got some other good projects going on in Rexburg. But the challenge is economics and also supply chain. One of the deals we did in Rexburg in that former Kmart box is a Hobby Lobby store, and they needed to upsize the electrical service. And so we had to put in a new transformer, and the lag time on getting that transformer was 18 months. So it's the demand's there. It's just economically and logistically very challenging.
Yeah, the IPUC does not allow Idaho utilities to store transformers. They have to purchase them for use immediately. So if you need a transformer, they have to buy it. And a lot of times it's 18 months that they're waiting on the market for transformer. It's crazy because that would be unfair to taxpayers or ratepayers. So I noticed it says 1385 on rents, but Class A rents are much higher than that. They're like $32, something like that a foot.
Yeah, a couple years ago, Class A rents were averaging about $25 a foot, and any new construction deals we're doing either in Twin Falls or in Eastern Idaho, the rents are going to be high 30s, low 40s, depending on location.
So at the end of 2023, 94,000 square feet of square footage of retail space was delivered, and only 15% of that was spec space. Of the spec space that delivered in 2023, 70% of the space is already gone, right? So no spec space has been delivered in 2024. What does that do for lease rates, and what does that do for supply and demand?
Well, lease rates in Boise crept up, and as far as retail goes, they crept up about 18 months ago to the $40 range, and we're finally there where we can actually build for certain tenants. We're doing a bunch of Starbucks deals in Eastern Idaho where their profit margins are so thick they can pay $200,000 a year. But most other retailers, we're a franchise market for most national chains, and so for a lot of those local franchisees, it's just not an attainable number. But we're getting close. I mean, if you look at recent lease comps, they're getting close to that point where it actually makes sense to start building again because people have adjusted their expectations.
Explain that, Brent, what the difference between a corporate market and a franchise market is.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. So a lot of national chain tenants, we can use Dunkin' Donuts, for example. They're going to pick off what they call the primary markets like Chicago, Los Angeles, New York. They're going to pick those off and say, okay, this is where we're going to roll out our corporate stores. And then the markets that aren't as important to us, we're going to have growth in the form of franchising. So if you're Dunkin' Donuts, you're picking off the best cities for your corporate stores, and then you're allowing people to buy franchise agreements for smaller markets like Idaho Falls. And since we're such a small tertiary market, most of our national chain deals are franchisees. Their credit is not quite as good as the corporate deals, which makes it harder to get construction financing to build for them. So it's just challenging overall right now. The demand is there.
And the rents would be slightly lower too, right?
The rents would be lower exactly for
So from a
corporate
landlord
lease.
perspective,
Yeah,
you can't use Chicago rents comparably, even if they're both Dunkins, it would be different Idaho Falls.
Exactly. A corporate tenant is going to have excellent credit, which means the cap rate is going to be lower and the property value goes up. Whereas a mom and pop franchisee, there's more risk to an investor, so the cap rate goes up.
Interesting. Josh Carroll, who's here from Hummel, was interested in learning more about areas of growth over the next 3 to 5 years. Which retail, so retail falls rooftops, we always talk about that. So what areas are you seeing predicting the most growth? And are there any new developments in the pipeline near those new rooftops? That's for anybody.
Yeah, Rexburg's on fire. I mean, we had that Kmart box. It's 88,000 square feet, and we're putting 3 tenants in it. And we have another 5 or 6 letters of intent that we passed on. But if we had space somewhere in Rexburg, we'd put them there. But these are tenants, since it's such a small market, we can't build for them. But Rexburg's on fire otherwise.
Do you have any Rite Aids shut down in the side of the state?
Yeah, Rite Aid shut down in 2008. Correct. Yeah.
So none of the, we just had some shut down on the west side of the state, and we were backfilling the space. And because there's no medium box at all in Boise, we were getting equal rents that we were getting from Rite Aid from local tenants because it was the only game in town, and you couldn't build it for that price. All right, let's shift gears and talk about, unless anybody has anything else to talk about, rooftops and growth, that type of thing, areas of growth. All right, let's shift gears and talk about ground at land. That's a natural transition. It's interesting, in an interesting trend we found in Eastern Idaho in Q1, Eastern Idaho had almost as many commercial permits as Boise, according to Construction Monitor. Overall, commercial permits in East Idaho were also up 70% compared to Q1 2023. What's driving that? What's the commercial development that is driving that construction?
I mean, from what we've seen, like Brent and I opened the office in 2016. We would always get calls from these groups saying, oh, we're looking for second generation space, this and that. We know we need to be in the market. And I think as a result of just opportunities in the market, understanding that it's growing, we were underserved from commercial perspective, commercial real estate perspective. So I think that's just lower interest rates at the time was fueling that, plus the growth of East Idaho overall. They're just being opportunistic.
So who's buying dirt? Is it users or developers? And is office, industrial, retail, any of those more significant part of your business now?
Well,
I just think that, at the end of the day, growth is a byproduct of people doing good research. Southeast Idaho is on everybody's radar. People do read the Milken Report that are outside our state. Companies that are in the development business, users that are looking for expansion opportunities, are all looking, where can we go, maintain a high quality of delivery for our company, employ a high quality person to work within this company, and continue to allow us to be on this path of growth. All roads lead north. I mean, if you look at the evolution since the late 70s from Las Vegas, Nevada, and Phoenix, Arizona, through Salt Lake City, and now into southern Idaho, you're just seeing an ongoing evolution that took place there starting 25 years ago. Las Vegas, Nevada was 400,000 people in 1979, and by the year 2000, they were 2 million. And it wasn't gaming driven. It was a broad diversification of their economy that started out with them becoming a major call center operation like they were in Phoenix. And then you move further north from there and you get into Salt Lake. In 2000, there was nothing south of the point of the mountain until you got to Provo. Orem was just a little farm town, and Provo was where BYU was, but there was no growth. If you look at that area today, it's fully developed out from the freeway, from the point of the mountain all the way down. Southeast Idaho, from Pocatello to Rexburg over the next 10 to 15 years is going to see that same evolution. Why? Because people are moving here. We've got a good public education system. We've got a moderate tax environment. We have a low cost of utilities. Our greatest challenge is going to be figuring out water solutions, because the reality is, if you're not in the city, then building any kind of big building is costly to you, depending on where you come in the land, because you have to solve for fire suppression. And that is not inexpensive when you're talking about doing a one-off deal. If you're gathering 100 acres and you're going to take that fire suppression and deliver it over 100 acres, you're going to get some economies. But at the end of the day, I think it's just an evolutionary thing that's going to take place because population growth is coming this way. And again, if you really compare, it's still much less expensive to do business here overall than it is in the Salt Lakes, in the Ogdens, and the Logans. Although when you look at a Logan and you look at a Twin Falls, in some ways on the industrial side, they're more evolved than we are. They're doing larger tilt concrete construction projects. We haven't seen any of that here. It's coming this way. And I would suspect, based on experiences of other markets, he who gets there first and finds the right user to seed a good project is going to have a great advantage over everyone else. Jim Lakes was a great example of a project that was before its time, divisible to 28,000 feet. that was a big divisible minimum in Idaho Falls. But no yard space, no laydown space at all in that project. And so there were parts of it that were good, but parts of it that missed the mark about what most users would want. So I'm really bullish about Southeast Idaho and what it's going to look like in the next decade.
On the topic of who's buying dirt right now, I mean, what I'm seeing is no one's buying dirt on a large scale. In fact, we have guys that we sold dirt to in 2020, 2021 calling me and saying, hey, what's that dirt worth now? I think I want to sell it. And part of the challenge is that, dirt is nothing more than a line item on a pro forma. And if your construction costs are going to be double and the cost of borrowing money has doubled, then something's got to give on your land pricing. And we're just not seeing that locally. A lot of people, either they're farmers and they don't understand the concept, or they're just not willing to budge. They'll sit on it until, the market turns. But we're not seeing a lot of land move right now.
So expand on that, and maybe Dennis can speak to that too. I mean, in spite of ESI and others' best efforts, construction costs are going up, rents are going up somewhat, but are we seeing this compression on the values of dirt, especially on the commercial side?
Well, I think I think there's a lot of pressure for developers to be able to develop the land at the price that the land is going for. I think that's what Brent's talking about. Prices have just doubled and tripled, and I sold irrigated land for $1,500 an acre and $2,500 an acre and $3,500 an acre, and now it's $12,000 an acre, and some's $25,000 an acre, and some of it's $100,000 an acre. So when you put those factors into building commercial buildings and the development cost of developing that property and everything, it becomes prohibitive at a certain point, and the cost of building right now. But people are, investing in land and holding because, we all know the old terminology, underneath all is the land. And you don't need to look very far around us to see what land can actually become worth, and what's happened in the last few years. It's unbelievable. I could tell you some really cool stories from 30 and 40 years ago. When I built a house for $22,500, my payments were $168 a month. Yeah, I should have kept it and rented it, and I could retire after that. But yeah, I'm like Mark, we're still in the area where everyone's moving, so the values are holding pretty steady. Even on homes, people were waiting. Oh, we're going to wait until this market crashes and everything goes down. They're still, holding within just a few percent of what they've been over the last 3 years.
Let's talk about residential for a minute. So permits were actually up in 2023. In other markets, we're seeing the shift that product sales, which used to be 50% resale and 50% new product, has really shifted to be more 75% new product. And I assume that's because of higher interest rates and people that locked in their rate at 4% are not selling their houses. Is this trend going to continue? First of all, is the Fed going to lower interest rates this year? Yeah, probably not. Yeah, maybe once. So what trends are we seeing there in residential? Because rooftop retail follows residential. Are we going to continue to see this growth on the residential side as the population continues to grow, but there's no resale product?
Yes, absolutely. I think the retail or the residential market is going to continue to be very, very strong. You don't have to go very far to see prices way higher than they are here. And people are moving here, they're escaping here. And the market, you look at the apartments and the townhouses and so on and so forth that have been being built. All of you are very familiar with that. You drive around town, every piece of ground has got an apartment on it. Those people are going to want homes eventually. A lot of them are. And so the demand is still going to be really, really strong. Just a matter of deciding what the market is, or deciding what people can afford.
In some of the other markets we serve, we're seeing fully entitled, fully approved apartment complexes not being built because of construction costs primarily and softening rents. Are we seeing that in this market?
Well, we have a fair number of projects going up.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't
I
take
hear
much.
that a lot. But I'm not hearing there's projects that aren't going up because people can't make them pencil.
Well, it's this old adage. Every time I come to one of these events, I listen to things like, construction costs are too high, land costs are too high, utility infrastructure costs are too high. And every market to the south of us has worked through that issue over the last 2 decades. I mean, I can remember doing 19-cent big box industrial deals in Las Vegas and 22-cent deals, big box industrial deals in Salt Lake. They're triple today for the same product. And that's a byproduct not of supply and demand, but of costs. Costs have just gone up. The reality isn't something we have to get our arms around is you're going to be hard pressed to see costs materially go down in the next decade. We've all been waiting for construction costs to go down. The only thing that's going to impact construction costs is demand at the end of the day. If there isn't demand, then you will see a softening in costs because you could displace a workforce. Suppliers are oversupplied, and so they're going to start lowering to get rid of inventory. But if you look at the history of that, that happens very seldom. The reality is, as long as there's a demand in the marketplace, whether commercial or residential, costs are going to continue to stabilize and inventories are going to continue to be costly to contractors. And so the solution to that then is what every other market that's, 10 or 20 years ahead of us has gone through. And that is that rates will come up and people will pay the rates because they want to be in a certain location. And that's what I see in Idaho Falls. I don't see a big declining in rates anywhere as much as I see demand driving, a higher price point.
Right. So on the multifamily side, maybe this is for Nick. We're tracking what, about 1,600 units in eastern Idaho. Are you seeing a slowdown in demand? We're also we were seeing a lot of these products being traded by investors. Are we still seeing demand for those type of investments?
Yes, we are still seeing a lot of demand. There are a lot of people still moving to the area. We've talked a little bit about the cost of construction. I was at a scramble at the Chamber of Commerce yesterday and was visiting with one of the local home builders. What you used to be able to buy in 2019 would cost $250,000. That same house costs $400,000 today, right? So in comparison to the rent increases, in 2019, what you could rent for $900, you're now paying $1,200. So that represents a 30% increase in rent increase, but it's 40 to 60% on buying a house. So there's a significant cost difference, even though the rents have gone up. There's still a lot more demand coming for a number of different reasons. One being the cost of housing is expensive. Buying a $400,000 house as a starter anymore. But we also have Ready had hired a third party researcher to try to get an estimate of what the housing demand looks like in eastern Idaho over the next 5 years. And this is a couple of years ago, but they expected we needed 1,100 rental units per year to be available over the next 5 years. We have 1,600 right now, but they won't be available for 18 months. Over the next 18 months, those will probably hit the market. So we're still in line with what they forecasted, but I don't think we're hitting the housing market. They forecasted that we needed twice that in residential houses. I don't think we're getting 2,200 units per year. And so people are still moving this direction. If they can't afford the house and the houses aren't available, they're going to they need places to rent.
Or they have to live with mom and dad.
Or they live with mom and dad. Yeah.
Nobody likes that, especially mom and dad. Let's talk about investments. Let's shift gears to investments. There's no question that rising interest rates and great economic uncertainty has hindered the investment market. We've also seen significant drops in number of transactions. We have seen significant drop in number of transactions and overall sales volume across all of our southern Idaho markets. If you compare to the end of 2021, which was a record-breaking year, sales volume is down nearly 60% in all markets. I would want to mention that since Q1 of 2023 versus Q1 of 2024, it's only down 14%. So So it really fell off the cliff after 2021. So we had our Boise forecast event a few months ago, and there were where our investment broker spoke on how he believes the investment market is in what he calls the great normalization. So Brent, do you agree that the investment market is returning to normal?
Yeah, I do. I mean, 3.5% debt was amazing, but it wasn't normal. If you look at a historical perspective, um, there's an adjustment period that we're going through right now. I think when the Fed started hiking up interest rates, people pulled their properties off the market. A lot of buyers were kind of waiting in the wings. And we've had to kind of coach people that, hey, your property was a 6 cap in 2021. It's now closer to a 7 cap. And once they get to that point psychologically, it's relatively easy to get deals done still. We're still moving product. I mean, it's from a historical perspective, it's normal.
Are you getting there? Are buyers realizing or sellers realizing that they need to come up on their cap rates, or are most of them pulling product off the market? What's the response been to the higher cap rates?
What we find is that clients will typically say, well, there's probably some 1031 exchange buyers with dumb money out there still, and we want to take it to market at a 6.5 cap or a 6 cap instead of a 7 cap. And I typically will say, okay, well, let's test the market, and let's see what kind of offers we get. And by the way, most of the 1031 exchange buyers they sold their properties when the getting was good. And so there aren't that many 1031 exchange buyers left. And so it's an education process. We take properties to market, and then we find within 3 to 6 months, there's a price adjustment, and then we get a bunch of offers. It's people need to make sure they're not leaving money on the table.
Where are buyers coming from, Darren? Where do you think buyers are coming from that on this stuff that is selling?
Yeah, I still get a lot of calls from buyers. They're coming off, almost all of them are coming off of the West Coast markets of Seattle and Portland and San Francisco. There's still people selling assets in those markets and reinvesting in Idaho because they like the regulatory climate here and the stability, the resilience to the pandemics and recessions here compared to what they're used to in those larger markets. And we hear a lot about the inbound migration of people moving here, and everybody knows a residential agent that's selling most of their houses to people coming in from California. And we're still getting fielding calls every single week from investors and inbound investment capital that's coming in off the West Coast markets. So, we're still, when we got into COVID, we started selling these investment properties in Idaho at cap rates that historically were out of line. When an investor had an investment in San Francisco, they might take the perspective that, hey, if I were to invest in the same product type in the state of Idaho, I would need to have a higher rate of return because it's a smaller market, less stable, on and on. And when we got into COVID and we had all the turmoil in those large markets on the coast, I mean, the paradigm kind of shifted on that, and people started saying, well, we have an eviction moratorium in place in Los Angeles, and so I can't even kick my tenant out, and he stopped paying rent here. So I'm going to sell my property in Los Angeles and reinvest it in Idaho, where that kind of a regulatory climate doesn't exist. And so we've had a lot of phone calls, the same story every time. I'm selling my property in Portland, Oregon. I want to reinvest it in Idaho, and I'll accept the same rate of return that I was enjoying in Oregon, just so that I can move the money out of there. And that's really interesting. It says a lot about the strength of our market and the perspective that people have on it. So,
and it's not one off. I mean, we have clients that are moving entire portfolios, selling 5, 6, 10 buildings over the course of a few years and reinvesting all that money in these lifestyle markets that we serve. It's pretty interesting. Well, we talked about the Milken Institute's best performing cities award. Overall, all of Eastern Idaho has had strong demographics. Ready Reports job growth is at 5.1. The national average is 3.9, and population growth is 6.8. National is 1.63. How long can this continue given the current infrastructure? And what does Idaho Falls need to do to continue to see this kind of vibrant economy?
I think the city of Idaho Falls has been very, very proactive. I mean, nobody likes impact fees, obviously, but the growth is coming and you have to prepare for it. And the funding, otherwise, absent impact fees, the funding is just not there to get the infrastructure that to accommodate the growth that's coming. So I would look to the city of Idaho Falls as an example of what's been done right.
All right. Last question. See if I can word this. What is your overall forecast for the Eastern Idaho economy? And what is one item that you're willing to go out on a limb and say is going to happen over the next 12 months in the local economy? We'll start with somebody who looks like they know what they're got an answer. Anybody? Brent.
The loan default apocalypse is not coming to Idaho Falls or Eastern Idaho.
The loan default apocalypse will not hit Eastern Idaho. Anybody else?
Yeah, I agree with Brent. I think there's too many positive dynamics and too many places that aren't doing things well, where we're going to be a shining star and continue to be. I think I would predict that Southeast Idaho is going to be the #1 market for the next decade in terms of growth opportunity, expansion, both residentially and commercially. And I think we have the public entities thinking about how to accomplish all of that and being proactive about it. I think it's just a remarkable place to be in the real estate business.
Dennis.
I agree with Mark, which is really a smart thing to do because he's really smart. But I think he's absolutely right. The growth here in southeastern Idaho. I was talking to a builder several years ago, and he was from back east, and he said, "This is the best kept secret in the world." And I said, what are you talking about? He said, "I'm from back in Missouri." He said, when I want to go fishing, he said, I go to the river and I stand in line, and then I can get to go in and fish. And if I step off the pavement, I'm on private property. And he said, he says, I can go here for 10 minutes. And he says, and I'm on public lands, and I can go fishing, and I can go hunting, and I can go bike riding or hiking or whatever I want to do. And he said, people here just don't know what they have. Well, the problem is they found out. Okay, they found out, and they've seen it on the news. People have left here and gone away, and then wanted to come back home. And it is the best kept secret in the country, and people are moving here. So I think the outlook is very positive for the future.
Anybody else? Nick?
I think I'll kind of piggyback. Maybe that's the cheapest way of going, but piggyback off of some of the things that are being said. You know, as far as the loan apocalypse not happening, there's a lot of loans that are going to be maturing or resetting their interest rates. And when they originally underwrote them, they may have been close deals. And now if they've got to increase the interest rate by 3 points, all of a sudden it may not cash flow. But if they're a very proactive landlord, then they will have brought the rates up over the last 5 years, because there's been a significant difference. And so, you know, I think those resets aren't going to have as much of an impact unless it was somebody who was not keeping track of their portfolio. As far as growth goes, Idaho Falls is starting to get a different name as far as growth and attraction. We used to call ourselves the Gateway City. Come here and, you know, come to Yellowstone and then stop here because it's the closest place to stay. Go to Craters of the Moon, then stop here. But now it's starting to feel like it's more come here and then check out Yellowstone while you're here. Come here and then check out some of the other things that are around while you're here. So growth, I think, will continue to grow pretty.
That
strong.
reminds me, I totally forgot to ask, how many hotel rooms can this town support? I mean, every time I show up in Idaho Falls, there's 7 more hotels under construction in this town. This is going to become the Vegas of the North. I swear, it's amazing. So what I'm hearing is no loan apocalypse. As Mark Twain said, rumors of my demise are greatly exaggerated. Office is not dead. And we're going to start seeing this big box industrial come up, but you got to build the right product, not get ahead of yourself, not get too far over your skis. And we're not seeing what they're seeing in Boise and some of the other markets with the overbuilding of apartments and residential. Is that true? That good summation? All right.
I will say with the apartments, a question that I get a lot is, are we overbuilding? You know, I think we spoke a little bit about like forecast and people moving, and there's still pretty high demand. a very interesting statistic is historically over the past 2 years, a new apartment complex has taken about 8 months to stabilize in Idaho Falls. Nationwide, that's 14 months, 14, 15 months. So I don't think we're going to overbuild right away. I think maybe it might take us a little bit longer to stabilize and be more of a closer to a national average. But I mean, we could overbuild if we keep going, but I mean, there's still a lot of opportunity. And I think as far as what's hitting the pike right now, we can absorb that. It might just take a little bit longer than what it has been historically, which has been 0% vacancy up until the last, 12 months.
Any concessions from landlords on the multi?
We're starting to see that a little bit.
Okay, so
Yeah,
there
we're
is
starting
some
to see that.
softening. Okay, a little longer to lease up.
I just want to disagree with all these guys here. Not because I disagree with them, just to spice things up. Hope you had a good time.
Okay, so we're all in agreement with, except Brian. I'm just going to wrap this up here then. All right, so I would be remiss if we didn't talk just a second about property management. Laura Odell, where's Laura? Raise your hand. Laura Odell leads our property management team, and she does an amazing job. Laura's a partner in the firm. Brent and Darren are partners in the firm, but Darren talked a little bit about property management side. We are aggressively growing on our property management side. We manage about 14 million square feet, over 400 buildings throughout the state of Idaho. And I wanted to talk just for a second about why use professional management. So one thing is that most leases require or have a pass-through provision that allows owners, if their operating expenses are increased over the prior year, to pass that increase through the tenant. Most of the properties we take over management for, the tenants are not being, those pass-throughs are not going to the tenant. And so the owners are leaving a bunch of money on the table. So good accounting practices would allow you to do that. And then all the costs paid by the tenants and operating expenses for property management is usually considered an operating expense in almost every lease, and that the cost of the management can be passed through the tenant. So the landlord doesn't even need to pay the property manager. It comes out of the operating expenses. Also, professional accounting, we use Yardi, which is the gold standard for all property management accounting. And a lot of people in a lot of the markets we serve think maintenance is management, and that's not. That's just a piece of it. Good financial accounting and eyes on the property and lease renewals and tenant relations are a really important piece of that. And then one of the things that TOK is able to do is bring economies of scale. For instance, our 14 million square foot portfolio, we're able to put that under a single insurance policy. And we save our owners anywhere from 10 to 50% sometimes on their just their insurance costs, which they can pass that savings through to their tenant. So we think that there's a lot of value in using professional management. We really appreciate you taking the time to spend lunch with us. Hopefully, do we have questions from? Is that what you're asking? Are there any questions from the audience before we wrap up? Just trying to finish right on time. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, I don't think so. All right. So I just to thank you again for taking your time to be with us. This group of professionals, is here to serve you, including Laura and all the TOK team. If you're looking to buy or sell or lease or manage commercial real estate, we'd really appreciate it if you would think of us first. Have a great day.